Hey, welcome back, Fast Monty's Garage. Today we get to mask, paint, and install our intake manifold on this Pontiac block. I'm excited. If you missed last episode, we actually divorced the water passage from the rest of the manifold. That actually saves us a little bit of heat for incoming air temperature. It also allows us to service one or the other piece. We don't have to remove the whole manifold just to service the manifold. The last thing it does, it makes it a little easier to install. But I'll walk you through the differences when we get to the installation point. And subscribe, by the way, because I'm almost done with this project and we're going to put it back in the car and start ripping around town. So, that being said, let's go hit the workbench and show you what you need to do to get started with the painting process. Time to talk paint prep, everyone. So, before we get to masking, we need to make sure our parts are clean. So I did all that die grinding work in here. We did all the chopping and cutting. So there's dust all over this. You probably can't see it. So first things first, you want to get an air nozzle. Blow it out as much as you can. Try and do it outside, not near your other car parts that need to go in the engine. And then next, I'm going to do soap and water, dish soap and warm water if you can get warm water. But soap and water, and then my favorite wax and grease remover is this stuff here. It's House of Color KC10. I actually put it into a pressurized spray canister, so it fills up with air and it sprays out. I love this stuff. You guys have probably seen me use this on all kinds of stuff. That's my favorite degreaser. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean all the parts and be right back and we'll do some masking tips. All right, I'm fully degreased. Used my soap and water, I used my wax and grease remover, and I used a lint-free towel to wipe it off. Now we have to talk about masking. It's very important that we mask our gasketed surfaces, so I'm just going to use masking tape, just like this. And I'm going to take a razor blade really gently and go around the perimeter of that gasketed area, and that also tackles those two threaded holes. We also have to talk about these threaded holes. Now be very careful that you do not get paint in there. The reason is you still have to connect or complete a circuit when your your temperature sending unit is in here. It's actually trying to complete a circuit, and if you don't have a proper ground, it's not going to work. So the very best thing to use to mask that is the actual mating part. So here's an older nipple I have. It's a 1/4 NPT. It fits in this one. Just screw it right in. I don't care if I paint it. I'll just tape that off. Actually, doesn't really matter. And do that for all the ports. So I have spare fittings for everything here. Even my front hole. So I can actually use this to hold the part while I'm painting too, like that. So that'll work out really well. So the only other surfaces I have to mask are the two ends here and the front. Let me do that real quick, show you the result. All right, I'm all masked up. Now the tricky part was actually this guy here. This is actually what's called back taping. I took some 3/4 inch tape and I laid it inside that lip and used my finger to press it against that edge, and then I folded it inwards and then used another piece of tape over the top. And that's a great way to shield that inside edge, called back taping. The rest of it's looking good. You don't have to get too exact here, because what we'll do later, if you really care about how much paint builds up on that machine surface, we can clean it up really carefully with a razor blade. Now, you really have to be careful because you can gouge aluminum with a steel blade. So plan B to that is a plastic blade. Check that out. So I'll show you guys that after I'm done painting. I'll use this new plastic blade I got from Amazon. Again, I'll leave the part down below, but I'm going to use this to clean off that edge, and you won't scrape your aluminum. Pretty cool. Now, with our manifold, same deal. We can use older plugs or older fittings to cover some holes. I have a screw in that hole, which I'm going to be using as a ground strap later. I'll tell you guys about that when I install it. But same thing, I'm going to tape the top here, I'm going to tape the deck flanges, and then on the tricky holes are actually where the injectors go. So where these injectors go, I don't want paint in here. So you can actually tape it like we did with that other hole, back taping it, or just find some plugs laying around. So I have these assortment of plugs, and they happen to fit perfectly in those holes. Check that out. I like this one especially because what I'll do, I don't have enough plugs for all of them, is I'll put tape in there, and then I'll use this plug to make sure the tape sticks to that ID of that hole, and I'll take the plug out and keep doing that with all the tape. But some of these plugs fit really good. Like this guy, this is a, I think it's a 3/8 inch hose rubber plug. It fits nice and snug in there. So I'm going to use that as my masking trick. It saves me some time, so I only have to do 4 holes instead of 8. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Finish the masking, and I'll show you guys what paint I'm going to use. I want to show you guys what I came up with on masking these holes. So like we did with the back taping, I just taken a little short piece of tape and delicately trying to put it all the way down in the hole without touching the side. Like that. Doesn't have to be touching the sides yet, but then I took this rubber plug, I stick it in there as far as it'll go, and then that forces the tape to stick to the sides on the whole ID, and I take the plug out like that, and now I can fold the tape over. Bam! Look at that! So I just put a little piece of tape over the top, but man, that's perfect. I love it. Got everything masked up. I got some fasteners where I don't want paint. I purposely left a gap on this top edge because I want to show you guys that plastic razor blade trick, just to scrape off the paint. And you want to do it before it dries, and it'll come right off. The green tape with the plug trick worked really well in those 8 holes, so we're good to go. I'm going to go ahead and use this Rust-Oleum engine primer, 500 degrees, with Pontiac blue, and this is for 66 to 70. You can get, this is an inline tube product, but you can get on eBay. I got this one at Butler Performance. They had a good price on it, so I'll leave a link below. But two coats of primer, 3 coats of color, and we should be good. So we'll be right back. Right out of the booth, check that out. And literally this has been less than 5 minutes since my last coat, so it's still going to be wet. And I'm using that new plastic razor blade. I'm going to try and start peeling some tape off here. Okay, so our initial mask is off. I'm going to go around the edge with this razor and see how it works. Oh yeah, so much easier than a normal razor blade. And you can still go around after with a normal razor blade if you're not comfortable with it. You want to make sure it's smooth to the touch. Because I can feel the raised edge here where I haven't scraped yet. So I'm just going around and do that whole thing. Hey, looks like it worked. I'll show you the end result after it dries. Just in case you guys are wondering, if you can't use the plastic razor, it's not working very well, you take a normal razor and you actually bend it a little bit like this. So see how it's bent in the middle? I don't know if you can tell, but right at that peak is where you want to focus your attention when you're scraping. You want to get as level to the surface as possible without gouging the aluminum. Because if you get too steep of an angle of attack, you'll start gouging at the aluminum and taking chunks out of the aluminum, which you definitely don't want to do. Alright, we're all painted, paint's cleaned up off of all of our gasketed surfaces. Now it's time to do some test fitting. You guys know how much I love doing that. Now what you're going to need from your gasket set is this little rubber O-ring. It goes in the front of the manifold right there. We are going to lube that up with RTV, my favorite. You're also going to need your lock, bolt, and key that goes on the water pump. And I'll show you that when we get to it. But for now, we're going to go hit the engine. I'm going to put these on with the gaskets just loosely. I want to test a theory I have about electrical conductivity. Guys, here's my test fit. So these are pretty much torqued down. They're not RTV'd or anything. I don't have the gasket in there. But what I was testing for was connectivity between the surfaces where our sensors go, because here's my ground strap over here, and here's my bolt going in the head. I have connectivity. What I'm shocked to see is that I have connectivity here. I thought for sure that there would be no paint, there'd be enough paint in between the bolt and that head to prevent any kind of connectivity. So my only guess is that maybe one of the bores is touching the side of the screw. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and install it now, and then we'll test it again, and hopefully it remains connected. So if you guys ever have an issue like that, that could be why. If your manifold's painted and your bolt has too much paint in between it to make a connection, your sensors aren't going to work. So anyway, let's go to the next step. All right guys, our next step here is actually to take this tape off, what I use to mask the intake holes. The problem is going to be, I'm guessing, as soon as we start to take this tape off, the paint, the dry paint, is going to want to come off of the tape and make a mess. So in order to prevent that, if you have any loose paint on there, is we're going to go ahead and tape over the masking tape, and that will stop any paint flakes from coming off. Okay, of course I ran out of blue tape, so I'm going to use my green tape. But now I'm not worried about any flakes getting into my intake runners. Just like that. So I'll keep doing this, doing the other side, be right back. Guys, test fit our gaskets. Obviously it should be good because I use it as the mask for painting the heads. And if you want, you can actually double check now to see if you want to remove some more gasket material if you have ported heads. I did a little bit. I can't do it in the corners because it's getting kind of thin. Now once that's good, and guys, if you have a full manifold, wait until I do this because you're going to have to combine both processes, okay? Because you're going to need to RTV that. But I use this stuff to help keep the gasket in place. So you just have to put a little bit on. You don't have to put it in the runner areas. Kind of like glue. So I'll go ahead and do the other side. Make sure all your bolt holes are clear of bolts. And now we'll carefully put the intake manifold on and make sure we try and not to touch the gasket to have it slide. So keep an eye on this top surface because that's what you're going to be able to see when you put the manifold on. Okay, let's put this bad boy on. So what I'm doing is I'm looking through the bolt holes on the far side, because if those bolt holes line up, and the holes on my side should line up just right. And they do. And let's just prove the theory here. So if I take this off, the gaskets have not moved. Awesome. That's why I love that paste. Let's put it back on. There we go. So I'm going to get my bolts in, and you just want to do finger tight, especially if you have the attached front end of the manifold, because we still have to pull the whole manifold together with our lock screw right here in the front of the manifold. All right, don't forget, we're bolting into aluminum. I'm using stainless steel fasteners. Put some anti-seize on those fasteners, otherwise they're going to gall and they might get stuck in there. Okay, now the fun part. Those of you with one-piece manifold, you do this first, and then you do what I showed you with the finger-tight bolts, and then we'll put this in, and I'll show you how they tie together. But we're going to use RTV in this hole here, and the easiest thing to do is you can actually just cover this whole gasket, put it in here, it's going to stick just fine. Same thing goes with our gasketing surfaces. This is kind of optional, but there's nothing wrong with putting a really tiny thin layer around the holes. So around this hole and on the head on the matching side. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll plop it into place. All right, so I put some RTV down on the head, so that's how my gasket's sticking there. Same kind of trick we did in the other gasket. So if you have a full manifold, a little bit of RTV there. Some of that, you can even put some RTV on the full gasket instead of that stick I used, and that'll keep the gasket in place. Then I put some on the mating surface, a really tiny amount, and then our donut is fully covered. So when we drop it in place, same trick we used before. Line up our holes on the opposite side, and it will drop right in. Now we finger tight those bolts. All right, I used the wrong terminology. I didn't mean finger tight, I meant finger loose. These should be loose so you can actually wiggle the whole manifold back and forth, because we still have to put this in. This goes right here with our key. Don't forget anti-seize if you need it for aluminum. So what we're going to do is we're going to tighten it down. It's going to pull the whole manifold over, and it's going to make this compress. So you should see some RTV ooze out. And then you can go through and tighten your bolts. So for aluminum heads, it's 25 foot-pounds. I think for steel heads, it's 45, but please look it up. All right, make sure you're still getting connectivity, because if you painted this, there might be enough paint in between the bolt and the aluminum to prevent a circuit. So here's my ground strap over here, and I'm getting good connectivity. Otherwise your sensors aren't going to work. So double check that. I inspected this after I test fitted it, and the washer had taken away some of the paint. That created my circuit. So there you go. All right, raise your hand if you like apples. How do you like those apples? Oh my gosh, it looks awesome. Told you that black would pop under there with the valve covers. Whew. All right, next step, guys, with your manifold, I highly recommend you get studs for your carb, because trying to line up your carb and putting the bolts in is painful. This makes it super easy. There's even notches on top where you can drop the nut on and then find the thread. It's pretty awesome. So I have a ton of work to do. I'm not going to film it. I got to put my whole March system back on. I already have a film for that. So just search on my channel and you'll find the March system installation. But again, I got a ton of work, so subscribe. You're going to see a ton of new projects. I got some welding to do under the car, some new exhaust tricks. Oh man, too much fun. So you guys know the drill. Build them fast, drive them faster. See ya.